It's a truth about America and about life. Now, we're curious, David, when you were growing up, whether you thought of America by the traditional phrase, a melting pot, where people from all these different cultures. Your family was Jewish down the street or a few blocks away. You had African Americans, Italians. Did you think of America as a melting pot back then? There are different terms now. People say the melting pot's wrong. Really, we're more like a salad. The carrots don't mix with the tomatoes and the lettuce. We're all there in our separate descriptions. Well, how do you think about that way in which we come together to form a common culture?
Well, when this country was started, anybody could show up. You didn't need passports or visas. And everybody who was showing up generally was from Western Europe. When people from Eastern Europe, from Southern Europe, who were people who were often Jewish, or people from Asia started showing up, people said, well, we don't want that kind of melting pot. We want a melting pot of Western European people who are British. So they imposed some constraints on the ability to immigrate in this country in the early part of the 20th century. And for some 40 years or so, we really had constraints on what kind of people could get into this country. And we saw the effects of that in World War II, when people who were Jewish were really turned away from this country, despite the fact that they were going to go back to the Holocaust. In many cases, people died who were turned away from this country. So we've changed the laws under President Kennedy, then President Johnson. We began an effort to change the immigration laws. They're better than they were before, not perfect. I do think that we are a bit of a melting pot in this country. People immigrate from all over the world. There's no other country that has as many people from all over the world as we do. We have 46 million people in this country who are immigrants, and 40 million who are children of immigrants in this country, a higher percentage than any other country in the world. I do think it's a bit of a melting pot. On the other hand, when I was growing up, I was living in a Jewish ghetto a bit, because in where I grew up in Baltimore, people who were Jewish could only buy homes in certain areas because mortgages forbade you to sell a home to somebody who was black or Jewish. So I grew up in an all Jewish neighborhood, and I didn't really know people who weren't Jewish until I got to be 13 or 14. And so it was not quite the melting pot then. When I went to a public high school, that was a citywide high school, I then saw the melting pot for the first time.